Suddenly, in a free market, workers who once could not find jobs were now at a premium. Everyone benefited, workers and employers alike, and the town thrived. One of the workers who arrived in Spartanburg was Mr. Juma. He came as a refugee from Idi Amin's Uganda.
We came in this country just with $139. I had a family, my wife and 2 kids. And we came with only 4 bags of clothing, which weighs about 40 pounds each bag. We were not allowed to take more than that. We have to leave all our possession, all our property in the Uganda. And myself, I just came down to Flowers Baking Company, and I was hired as a laborer to work in the plant at $2.49 per hour. Thank you.
5 years later, he was chief accountant of the company. In a free market, his best protection, his real wealth, turned out to be his skills and his desire to use them.
America has to offer me a lot of things. And this is a great country. I came in this country penniless. Today, I own a house, I own 3 cars. My wife has got a good job. I myself have got a good job. And the children are schooling. And everything has been working so fine. I believe this is because of the opportunity. This is whoever wants to work in this country. There's a lot of opportunity.
When unions get higher wages for their members by restricting entry into an occupation, those higher wages are at the expense of other workers who find their opportunities reduced. When government pays its employees higher wages, those higher wages are at the expense of the taxpayer. But when workers get higher wages and more civilized working conditions through the free market, when they get them by firms competing with one another for the best workers, by workers competing with one another for the best jobs, those higher wages are at nobody's expense. They can only come from higher productivity, greater capital investment, more widely diffused skills. The whole pie is bigger. There's more for the worker, but there's also more for the employer, the investor, the consumer, and even the taxpayer. That's the way a free market system distributes the fruits of economic progress among all the people. That's the essence of the age of the worker.
The discussion is already underway here at the University of Chicago, so let's join it.
Well, we tried a free market system without labor unions. We tried it back in the 1920s and into the 30s, and it led the world into the biggest economic disaster it's ever seen in modern times. Now, I don't think we're talking free market or labor unions. We're talking free market with or without labor unions. And a free market system without labor unions is a total disaster.
Let's get other reactions to this now around the group. It's the free market system, Milton Friedman's been arguing, I think, not labor unions, which best protect the interests and serve the interests of the worker. Walter Williams, your reaction?
Well, I think clearly labor unions serve the best interests of workers who happen to be members of labor unions at the expense of workers who are excluded from being members of labor unions.
Ernest Green?
I don't think you can have a democratic society without having trade unions. I think if you look at any democratic country, it's essential to it. Right of workers to organize, and I think it's consistent. If we're to maintain a democratic country, those freedoms that the right of workers to organize is a primary objective that we have to maintain.
Bill Brady?
Well, if they are so vital, why are so many union members leaving the union? Why are they losing so many decertification? Why are the unions losing so many decertification elections? Why has the number of union members declined so precipitously from 23% of the labor force to, what is it now, less than 18%?
Well, it depends whose figures you're reading, but workers aren't leaving the labor movement in droves, and the union is not declining precipitously. My union, the United Steelworkers of America, the major unions in the country, many small ones are out organizing and growing. The mix of work in the society is changing. We have some employers, as we saw in the film, who can't wait to rush off to the South and try to get in an anti-union environment and invest their money in prosperity in the South instead of in the North. And surely if you invest money anywhere, you're going to have prosperity. So we also have a mix in terms of civil service and service workers, where we have employers who have grumbled on that film.
I don't know that if you invest money anywhere that you're going to have prosperity. I don't think that that's a given. That is, you seem to me to be dealing in a premise there that is incorrect.
But
well, we haven't got a lot of time.
Wait a minute. The key question we're discussing is, who protects the worker? Is it the labor union or the free market that best serves his interest?
Well, it seems like from the evidence that I have from a number of research projects that I've engaged in, I found that labor unions protect their members often at the expense of disadvantaged people. And it's a very, very interesting question that labor unions down through the ages have discriminated against all kinds of people in favor of a particular class of workers. We find that labor unions have gone out on strikes and have murdered and maimed people because other people sought entry. And in terms of Mr. Green's remark, he says that in a free democratic society we need labor unions. Yes, that is true. We need the right for voluntary association. That is, people have the right to form associations, but it should not be a requirement that you be a member of a labor union in order to establish a contract for employment.
Can't we get some perspective in this, Walter? Talking about unions down through the ages makes no sense at all in terms of where we're at now in this century at this time. This business of trying to relate where unions come from to the medical profession and hypocritical oaths, or hypocritical oaths, however one looks at that, back in the Greek islands really has very little relevance.
Yes, it does.
The violence, hear me out a minute, I waited patiently.
Okay.
The violence that's associated with, well, not so patiently, but I waited. The violence associated with the labor movement and so on has been minimal and was a reaction in this century, not over the ages, a reaction in this century to the violence done workers by corporations and powerful economic groups when there was no workers' organization to protect them and no way to deal with their greed and with their power.
Now I'm turning to Milton because he's heard the flavor of the discussion.
Sure. What Lynn Williams is now saying is utter nonsense. And there's no two ways about it. The conditions of the worker in this country before there were labor unions were very important, improved very greatly. You cannot tell me that millions of people, my parents, your parents for all I know, parents of many people around, came to this country from Europe in order to be exploited and in order to be subjected to violence. Of course, there were incidents of violence.
I agree with that vehemently. I mean, most of the blacks came to this country not voluntarily, but they were shipped here. And the interesting thing about the issue on Spartansburg,
hold on for a second,
is that you left out...
Let him finish, and then back to you, for sure.
The blacks are an exception, and I agree with you completely.
22 million exceptions, though.
They are a very important exception. But there are also millions and millions. The people that Mr. Williams represents are not mostly black. They are mostly from the Slavic countries that came from
but if you look at the membership of the steelworkers...
If we go back, there was violence, of course. There always has been violence. It's not excusable. I'm not excusing violence on the part of anybody. But I agree with Mr. Green and with Walter Williams that people should be free to organize. Of course they should be free to organize. What I object to is the special privileges that have been given by government to labor unions, which are not available to other groups at all. When labor unions have used violence in industrial disputes, they are not subjected to the same sanctions as people ordinarily are. When cars are turned over in the course of a labor dispute, how often do people go to jail as a result of it?